welcome to this LPM webcast in partnership with PracticeEvolve, where we'll be exploring in great detail a range of topics within the space of technology investments and their bearing on key issues, current issues such as challenging economic circumstances, talent attraction and retention, and areas where firms feel like they need more support in the technology space. The background for this webcast comes from a piece of research that PracticeEvolve conducted earlier this year and released last month in partnership with LPM. We surveyed more than 160 business leaders from the SME legal space and quizzed them on critical questions around their technology systems, such as their levels of realization, returns on investment, degree of integration between systems. And the report was broken down into three key areas of digital competency, cloud, and connectivity. There's plenty of interesting data in the report, which we'll be exploring today, and we'll be discussing some of the key findings. We have a set of lovely panelists with us to discuss them with us. But before we allow them to introduce themselves, I'm just going to pass to Adam, who's our representative from PracticeEvolve, to just contextualize the report and give us a quick introduction.
Thanks, Aftab. Yeah, I recognise some names on the attendee list, so welcome everyone and thank you for joining today. For those of you who don't know PracticeEvolve, I won't go into too much detail, but we provide practice management solutions. We're still relatively new, I suppose, to the UK market, but very established in both Australia and Ireland, with a growing number of clients in the UK. And most of you will probably be aware that SOS and Line Time form part of that PracticeEvolve group. So that's who we are. I'm Adam Bullion. I head up the marketing team within PracticeEvolve group. And I'd just like to say, firstly, welcome to everyone today. A big thank you to everyone who responded to the survey. Big thank you to Emma and Tony today as well for joining and being our panelists. And of course to LPM, who actually ran the research piece and really put this together. So thank you to them. I suppose that the purpose of conducting the report was really very much to provide the market with a barometer of the challenges we all face going into the year ahead. And taking away from the recent actions of the government, which I'm sure we're all keeping an eye on, I think we're probably all aware that we were going to be in for a little bit of a harder time post-pandemic, and that might be a little bit of an understatement, to be fair. But I think it's really important for law firms to share challenges and see that we're not all in this in isolation. Everyone has much the same sort of challenges, as we'll learn from some of the outcomes of today, and learn that they're facing similar challenges, I suppose, and also what it is law firms are doing to sort of combat those challenges. So as an example, we know that 70% of firms from the research, 70% of firms are already on their way to the cloud, but there does remain a percentage of firms who are unsure as to the benefit of cloud technology. And this isn't just necessarily about cloud, obviously, today, but using that as an example. So the report allows us to identify the reasons why that is. And the report suggests that it's relating to education, complexity, and risk. But ultimately, it's not just the technology that firms need, but what wraps around the technology as well in terms of knowledge and connections between different softwares. So I'm looking forward to this session where we're going to explore some of those key headlines that Aftab's pulled out. And I think it'll be quite insightful for most of you today. So thank you, and back to you, Aftab.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it. And you obviously alluded to some of the key headlines there, and there's plenty of really interesting nuggets that came out of this research. But before we kind of dive into them and present some of the findings, I just wanted to allow our panel, we have Emma Sell and Tony Fisher with us. I'm just going to come to you one by one, just to give us a quick introduction of you yourself and your role in your firm, and then just a quick one, and then we can move into discussing the findings. So why don't you kick us off, Emma?
Yeah, thanks, Aftab. Hi everyone. I'm Emma Sell, working as the Chief Operating Officer at Fox & Partners. We're based in the City of London, a boutique firm primarily doing employment and partnership work with a basis on contentious work, which has the contentious element. I mention it because it has more of an impact on our IT kind of problems, issues, and what we kind of need from our systems. But yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tony Fisher. Yeah, I'm the CEO of Fisher Jones Greenwood Solicitors in Essex and now Suffolk. we've got about 11 offices spread over various locations, and we are really a general high street firm. We're not a niche firm. A mixture of property, private, commercial, family, etc. So we almost run several different businesses within the same firm, and they all have their own individual IT needs, which sometimes are difficult to harmonize in one practice management system. So that's me.
Right. Yeah. Well, so that's hints at some of the key challenges we'll be talking about today. So yeah, without much further ado, let's go straight into the findings. The first, I'm just going to share some slides here that kind of highlight the key aspects of the report. The first one is very much a kind of contextualization. So business investment priorities, we kind of listed a few for people, which include things like cost cutting and include attraction of and retention of key people. But despite all of that, tech very much dominated investment priorities from the research. That's starting with improving internal systems and workflows, and all the way to integrating the tech that's already there. So it's just it clearly shows that irrespective of the circumstance, and of course at the moment circumstances are changing from day to day, but irrespective of that, tech is very much high on the agenda for firms. So if we could just start off with a broad contextualization of why tech is continually an important thing to focus on, given the climate and given the environment we're in, and then we'll obviously go more specific than that. But Tony, if you could just set out why technology is valuable at a time like this.
Well, we've always been fairly tech focused, but I think that has accelerated over the last couple of years or so, partly driven by the pandemic, when of course we all had to immediately go and work at home, which we did successfully very rapidly, but also because we have a general recognition of how the environment for legal services is changing and how digitalization is demanded more now than it was before by clients. So it's partly client driven as well, and the need to improve efficiencies, create cost savings. All of these things flow into your ideas around what your IT spend should be spent on, and we have introduced quite a number of new systems over the last 12 months or so. So I'd say that we're in the 66.9% as putting that at the top of the list. Probably not putting retention of key people fourth on the list. I think that would be either first or second. But generally, our investment priorities reflect what you found in your survey, really.
So I suppose we'll come to that retention of key people aspect in a bit, but I just wanted to, if I could follow up on that. So in an ideal world, obviously tech investments would lend themselves to cost effectiveness, and at the moment that's pretty much the be all and end all, but given the uncertain economic circumstances. So are you at a point, Tony, where it is actually tech investments are leading to that cost saving, and they are producing that ability, that efficiency to be able to save money and stay agile?
Well, I think they have been doing that for a number of years now, really, but the investment has increased over the past 12 months. So we haven't seen the return on that yet because we're in the process of implementing new systems, so the capital cost hasn't been recovered. But every time we add something on, it increases the level of efficiency with which we can actually deliver the same services, and sometimes it exponentially increases the efficiency, and especially where the emerging technologies are concerned. One of the big challenges is number two here, integration of existing and new technology, and that nobody has produced a system that does everything better than anybody else. So we're constantly, I'm sure, like other people, adding on new things and trying to make them work with what we've got already, and then retraining staff to use them. And I think that will probably always be the case because there is no perfect system, and there probably never will be. But it's quite challenging, especially if you're, we've just recently taken over another firm, so we've had another 40 people to integrate, not just into the systems, but into the culture of the firm as well. So that was a huge project involving lots of resource to get people up and running and starting to work more efficiently.
I mean, so those are, I mean, the key points that are coming out of there are things that we really dive deeper into, especially the integration aspect. And, you know, how well do these systems integrate with each other? What more is needed, and as well as the relationship to people. You know, the relationship between people and technology, whether that's their ability to realize it or whether that's their experience with it and how that affects their desire to stay at a firm or stay in a particular environment. But before we come to that, Emma, I just want to hear your perspective in terms of tech investments at a time of uncertainty. Has it in any way put the brakes on your desire to invest more in technology?
No, again, we're in the joining Tony in the 66.9%. We've actually invested quite a lot more, especially coming out of the pandemic. We found that not just clients, our staff have kind of requested it as well. By the short notice of having to work remotely, I think it more showed up what gaps there were in our systems and efficiencies, and where we needed to invest our money most, especially, you know, when you're working from home. It's actually, we found that it's much more of a 24/7 environment, and we couldn't afford any downtime in our systems, because clients and barristers, whoever, know that you're at home, you know, they think you're contactable all the time. So we had to make sure that the systems all reflected that as well. And also keeping up and with what's going on. You know, the courts suddenly, who were kind of notoriously a bit slow in terms of technology, was suddenly all electronic and PDF bundling and everything like that. And it was quite a rapid turnaround. And also with that comes kind of, you don't want to make rash decisions on what elements you're purchasing, but at the same time, you don't want to be left behind as well. So it's been quite a rapid turnaround of investment, and a bit like Tony, we're not quite seeing the return on the cost effectiveness of it yet, because we haven't quite gained the capital back, but I can already see that it's taking up less fee earner chargeable time dealing with kind of bundling and, you know, somewhat administrative tasks as well.
Right, I suppose that's the question, because I mean, I was going to ask you about this return on investment aspect, because as you said, a lot of the tech, and Tony's touched on it as well, a lot of the tech investments in recent years at least have been very staying competitive oriented. You know, they've been staying in the game, meeting the clients where they want to be, you know, being able to continue business continuity during the pandemic. So very kind of rear guard action kind of tech investments where you're not necessarily looking for value or return. So what would you say to a firm that is now saying that, you know, we want to we don't want to invest at the moment when there's no guaranteed return? You know, how do you justify that continued investment, especially at a time where things like cash might come under strain? I mean, I'm sure no one is yet feeling the effects, but things like liquidity might come under strain.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance, I think, but I think we've taken the view that you know, there's no choice, right? If we want to retain our clients and we want to provide those services in the future, they will go to the firms that make it the easiest for them to take that advice. And you know, a lot of that is around the accessibility of the individuals, which is leveraged by the use of better tech. And I know we're going to come on to staff retention, but I think it's very important for those purposes as well to give people good systems so they can get on and do their job more efficiently. And it's really a sort of going to be brought into much sharper focus, I think, if there is a recession and there's a downturn in the property market and so on and so forth. There'll be, you know, a lot of people chasing the same work, and those who are better organized and can produce the work at a more efficient pace and at a more more usable fashion from the client perspective are going to have a huge competitive advantage in that market.
Right.
Adam, feel free to chip in with any questions at this point.
I was actually just going to say, I've been talking. I used to work for Auto Trader, And I think that client service and experience is so important, and being able to free staff up to be able to offer that to clients is fundamental. And, you know, I mentioned Auto Trader because, you know, I still know people there, and they tell me, well, when I was there about 8 years ago, you know, people would tell, it always used to be, if you email a dealer, you expect a response within an hour to 3 hours. Whereas they're saying now people are emailing dealers, and if they haven't had a response in 10 minutes, they've moved on to buying another car, because they don't want to pick up the phone. They want to have that immediacy of response. And I think that's, you know, that's why all of these are sort of interlinked, because, you know, if you have a better system and workflow and better technology to be able to deliver that client experience, and you've got sort of key people being able to deliver that, or enabled to deliver that through technology, I think that's kind of crucial. And that's why I think they're kind of wrapped up together, those top 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, and I'd just to add on to that, I think it's fair to say that obviously our client demographic are getting younger and younger the more we go on, and I think they're much more tech savvy and would rather use, even just, you know, for example, onboarding, use an app rather than, you know, have to print out a document, sign it, send it back, fill out a questionnaire, scan it back in, or take a photo of it. You know, even their passport, things like that. Even just digitalizing that can streamline, you know, a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes that they don't need to use.
I suppose one interesting question for both of you then, I mean, and not to lose out on other points that we might be addressing later, but the interesting question that comes out from that is, how do you kind of address the different client needs then? Because some, as you said, are younger and they would appreciate that tech, but you run the risk if you move fully to a tech delivery model that you alienate some of your older clients, or some clients who are less tech savvy. So how do you find that balance then?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think that you know, we have offices in we'll call them retirement seaside resorts, and you know, the demographic there is very different. You know, very few are under the age of 60, rather than, you know, the other way around. And they still do want to come into the office, talk to people. If they get a letter, then they come into the office to talk about the letter, you know, and they don't go anywhere near a computer unless they're absolutely forced to. And that was true even all the way through the pandemic, when the offices were shut and they were banging on the doors almost. So you've got to have the ability to deliver the services in a number of different ways, I think. So if you've got a broad demographic in your client base, I mean, if you act exclusively for tech companies, then, you know, you don't need to worry about it. But we certainly face that issue. We have to be able to provide those services in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, Emma, if you have something to add on that.
No, I was just going to say, I think the whole thing about client service is giving the client what they want and giving them the option. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That flexibility is so important, right? Is to maintain that flexibility, but it's such a crucial aspect of it to have the tech in place to serve clients that do demand it and do ask for it. So just, I mean, finally, just to tie this slide on before we move on, is coming to the aspect of people and their experience of tech, and people within the firm and their experience of tech. So pretty significant finding from the research is that 95% of respondents see some connection between the employee experience of their systems and the ability to retain talent. And 25% of this would rank this as significant or very significant disconnection. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on how does that impact, especially at the moment with all the debates around recruitment and how the market is looking. What role does tech play, and how does that factor into your decision making when you're thinking about people and tech as a combined force? Let's start with you, Emma.
Yeah, I would say there definitely is a link, and I think we've definitely, well, I think any law firm I've worked at, tech has been, or IT has been, kind of the biggest moan from anybody that works there. That tends to be what they moan about the most. But I think listening to staff as well, listening to what they want, what the issues are, not just, you know, a shutdown and restart, but actual kind of needs that they want. I mean, I don't know if we're going to come on to it, but one of the things that our staff have raised is because they're not in the office now, and you can't just go and sit next to somebody at a desk necessarily and talk to them about a document. Collaboratively working on the same document at the same time as people electronically, whether that's with a barrister or another lawyer or even your client, that's a gap that we're actually trying to find at the moment. And that's something that working collaboratively is something that definitely our staff have asked about and inquired about, and I think is very important to them. But equally, I think it hasn't happened to us, but I think people will leave if the systems don't support what they're trying to achieve.
Would you say that's the same in your case, Tony?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we've talked about the client-driven element of this, but there is a staff-driven element, both in relation to making people's lives easier and in relation to providing them with flexibility to be able to work from wherever they want to work from, basically. And, you know, that's come into very sharp focus over the last couple of years. And it's the tech that's allowed us to do that. We've taken a pretty light touch to sort of hybrid working, and people are probably, I mean, I couldn't say this for certain, but I mean, spending about 50% of their time in the office and 50% of it working at home. I mean, it varies from department to department, but on average, I would say that's probably true. And it has to be a seamless link, basically. You know, they have to be able to feel that they are just as effective working from wherever they are, even when they're on holiday, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think there is a cultural link to the tech as well, isn't there? In terms of giving people the tech to work from wherever they happen to be, but also the trust, knowing that you've given them the tech, so you can trust them to work remotely, and that then empowers them and makes them feel kind of a lot more valued and a lot more invested. So it's kind of one big circle.
It's funny. So the themes that come out there, obviously the flexibility as well as the connectivity, you know, the seamlessness of their experience is very important, as well as flexibility. So Adam, if you could help us segue into the next area of discussion, if in terms of if you could, for example, things that Tony mentioned there in terms of the staff experience, you know, being seamless and being flexible, what role does cloud play on this? If we go a little more into specifics of technology.
Yeah, I mean, we are cloud hosted predominantly. There are certain elements which are still in-house, but we are primarily cloud hosted. What I would say is I can see, and it is top on your chart, which is quite sort of reassuring to know, but the complexity and the time of the migration, I would say you shouldn't underestimate just how much time is involved in that, because you want to get it right. You want to make sure if you're changing systems or even integrating at the same time that you've got all of the structures in place and that it is going to mirror what you've got now or be how you want it to be. Don't underestimate the time that takes, and partner involvement or management involvement in that, because it's not insignificant.
Adam, could I come to you to respond to that, some of that, or just generally outline the role that cloud has to play in before we move into the complexity?
Yeah. I think for me, Emma's absolutely right. Don't underestimate you know, the length of time and that's required and the complexity that is in there with moving to cloud. I think it's more, you know, I think for us, you know, we've got a duty of care to clients as well who want to move to cloud, in terms of really enabling them and helping them move towards cloud. And I know from the research, you know, we asked a simple question, you know, the difference between cloud native and cloud hosting. And the response was, I think it was around 70% of the response was that they didn't understand that the difference between the two. And in all honesty, you know, I think it's great, you know, great. An IT person will always understand that. But I think really, you know, someone like myself, I didn't really understand that until I joined PracticeEvolve. I didn't really know what's meant by multi-tenancy and single tenancy and private cloud, public cloud, or all of these terms. And there's a lot of terms that are floated around that I think sometimes confuse people, not everyone, and I don't want to offend anyone sitting there going, I know everything about cloud. So, but I think there is a general education piece that, you know, we as legal tech providers have to be able to offer and provide to the market and to clients to help them on that journey. And that starts with really outlining the benefits of cloud. You know, we'd never say to someone you should move to cloud if they're absolutely dead set against it. But obviously, you know, I think that I mentioned the 70% of earlier of people going towards cloud, and we saw that in the last slide. But that 30% who are against cloud or against moving to cloud, they are going to be left behind, not just from an ability point of view, but also from a cost-saving point of view, because the technology that they're using is going to become more expensive because there's less demand for it. And I think the market really needs to be aware of that. So I do worry about that 30% that are moving onwards there. I'd be keen to hear the opinion of Tony and Emma on that as well.
Yeah, I could just say from our point of view, one thing that we found, or I found certainly when talking to people about cloud migration, is suppliers or technology people I found a lot of people assumed that we knew what they were talking about. And it's very, like you say, with all the different facets of it, it is very hard to understand it. And being able, especially sort of in our roles where you've got to go back and report to you know, management board with a recommendation, you've got to fully understand it, and having someone that can break that down and tell you exactly what's what and understand your firm and what's actually going to be beneficial without it being a sales pitch is actually really, really beneficial.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you know, there's always been a disconnect between technologists and lawyers, and there always probably will be, you know, talking to each other in different languages. I think we experienced that at its, you know, most acute when we first installed a practice-wide practice and case management system, but that was many years ago now. But the resistance and the sort of lack of understanding of each other's needs that emerged as a result of that taught us an awful lot about how to approach the introduction of new systems in the future. And I think you've got to win hearts and minds as well. You know, it's not just about putting systems in. Staff need to be motivated to actually use them to the best and use, you know, 90% of their functionality, not 10% of it, because there's always a danger of that happening. And key to that is the communication and especially the training. You know, I think a lot of people do skimp on training because everything else has cost so much, but really that's the worst thing you can possibly do, because you're not going to get the benefits you're paying for unless people know how to extract them from the system.
So there's a few findings here. So one is the fact that clearly, I mean, 84% here say that support from providers, and that resonates with what you guys were saying, is that you need to be talking not at cross purposes. And then Tony, you hinted as well as at the people side of it, which is, do you feel like your people need to know your systems better? You know, do you feel it needs improvement? And clearly, the resounding message on the market is that yes, you know, people do need to understand their tech systems better. But if we go back to just the slide on cloud migrations, how much of a role does the people side of it, or the lack of understanding of the system, play in that complexity that 60% or 61% are experiencing? And how much of that is other complexities that come, more practical complexities? I'll start with you, Tony, if that's okay.
Well, it's difficult to put a percentage on those two things, but you know, those two elements certainly apply, because on the one hand, you've got the actual technical challenges of making systems work with each other. I should say that we moved into the cloud a number of years ago, so I'm really talking about, you know, adding on systems to the systems that you've already got in the cloud. And you know, there's a big technical challenge quite often. Certainly the links are, you know, classically difficult to make work, and live data updates and so on. But then you've got, yeah, the people side of it is to help people to understand the additional functionality they've got available to them as a result of what you've done, and to encourage them to use it. And that's particularly true of the new artificial intelligence applications where fee earners are being asked really to approach what they've always done in a completely different way, and develop a new mindset as to how they approach the sort of analysis that they would have done in a paper-based system, or even just electronically looking at PDFs or whatever they did in a case management environment. And it is very different, and actually we've found that difficult, a difficult journey to take people on, despite high levels of support from suppliers. So and I'm not sure exactly what the answer to that is, other than to have one or two champions. We've always looked for IT champions in each of our teams, people who've got a particular enthusiasm, who can infect other people with it, and they are trained to be trainers. But when you're talking about, right, this is the way you've always done it, but now you just have this amazing thing on the screen which can do all sorts of things that in minutes that used to take days doing. Getting buy-in for that is quite hard. I think people are scared of it, and don't want to get it wrong, don't want to break it, but I don't think they're worried about losing their jobs because a machine is going to be doing their job. I think it's just that sort of, it's like a new paradigm for them that it's difficult for them to get their heads around.
And I mean, obviously that buy-in and cultural side of it is so important, but Emma, in terms of a very technical side of things, so if you look at the second point here, complexity of integration with the existing systems, on a very technical side, how does that cloud journey become complex when you're trying to create that bespoke system, something that Tony touched on? No system does everything. So in the end, every time you onboard a new solution, you have to end up creating an integration, or you have to, there is a complexity involved in that. So how is that something that you deal with?
Yeah, it is very frustrating because you seem to always be trying to find workarounds and ways to kind of bolt on other functionality to each other. Yeah, I don't really know what the answer is, other than that it is extremely frustrating. We've had, similar to Tony said, sort of the equivalent of champions, but sort of people, it's just a small group at different levels, say one member of support staff, one associate, a partner, who kind of volunteer to try out the new system and test it for how it's integrating and suss out what the issues are, so that before we roll it out to everybody else and try and get buy-in and tell them how brilliant it is and how much easier it's going to make their life, we actually know that it will before we roll it out. And that kind of gets a lot of teething problems out of the way. It's much more time consuming and slightly more costly, but we found that actually spending that extra bit of money and time with people who can know what they're looking for, and also it helps them, like you say, they're then trained on it to know the full capacity rather than using the 10-20% of what's on offer. They can then show other people in the team, well, actually it can do this, this and this, and yeah, that adds value and makes them feel empowered as well.
Right, I just want to add at this point that to those listening in, so there is a Q&A function here, so if you do feel like chipping in with your own comments, insights, or asking a question to any of our panel, please do. Adam, I just want to come to you about the integration piece, because there's obviously, as both of them have now mentioned, it's quite frustrating for firms to try and integrate various solutions, and no one system does everything that they need. So as someone who's on the other side of this equation, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I understand the difficulties, because obviously there's always going to be software that one firm prefers to use over another. I mean, from a legal technology provider perspective, we can integrate and form relationships with no end of no end of people out there, or businesses out there. The problem that we have is that it's almost impossible to maintain all of those. If you're building one integration for one client within one business, and everyone else is using something else, it doesn't make commercial sense to us. I'm being very honest there. It doesn't make commercial sense, and it doesn't actually benefit the market. What we've had to do is we had to try and choose and select the best providers out there that suit the many rather than the few. So taking, for example, I suppose, Perfect Portal, InfoTrack for conveyancing, DocuSign being the leading electronic signature brand, there we have to work with those. There will be others that come along that firms want to work with, but we can't deliver every single one of those because it does take away from what the majority actually needs. So we try and work within best in breed, I suppose is the terminology I'd maybe use there, and progressive providers, but integration as well. Again, I think it comes down to Tony and Emma mentioned about using the 90% what's on offer rather than the 10% of what's on offer, and I do think again that falls not completely on the provider, but I do think that providers need to take a little bit more responsibility around providing the tools to be able to regularly train staff up, because firms don't want to invest in training every couple of weeks, every time they have a new starter, to expose more of it. And I think the research also suggests or says to us, if we give people sort of the knowledge, they can find more innovative ways of working themselves. Because generally people are smart. We talk about the pandemic and worried when people went home to work and worried about productivity going down. In fact, I think the vast majority of us will agree productivity went up. Maybe people working less hours, that's okay, productivity is still up, and it's probably because they were finding new ways of working, whether it was within the systems that they're using or whether it's just the way that they manage their days and manage their clients and manage their workload. And so I think for me, you've got to integration. Sorry, I've gone off piece there, haven't I? Completely, apologies. But I think integrations, we have to take a little bit more responsibility ourselves but also explain to clients why we integrate with the partners that we do integrate. And then any others can still use APIs to integrate in, but it's at their cost rather than the provider's cost.
Yeah, I think so. One of the key findings, another really interesting one, was that 74% of our respondents said that they use less than 50% of their PMS's full capability. Right? And I think what's coming out of this conversation so far is that whether that's on the training side or whether it's on the integration and systems side, there seems to be a slight disconnect between what suppliers can offer from a commercial perspective and what law firms need, right? That's including on a training side, on a competency side. So I suppose what we can try to do in the last few minutes of this webcast is try and address how they can kind of meet in the middle. So for example, on the training side, if law firms are using less than 50% of their capability, Tony and Emma, firstly, how is it that you manage your training at the moment? How do you upskill your staff to make sure that they're using the systems correctly? And how would more support from the provider, do you think, help with that?
Sorry.
Sorry, why don't you go ahead?
I mean, we do have all our training is provided by third parties. We don't have any in-house training available, so we do rely on them. As an example, when we upgraded our recent document management system, we had the training sessions. We bought a bulk set of days for training, and obviously for following the pandemic, some of these were done remotely in different sessions. We had the training sessions, they were recorded, but then there was a significant delay that we hadn't envisaged before we actually went live. So people had their training a while before and they went live. We went live and lots of people have forgotten it. And one thing that would have been really useful is actually to give people almost the training on the 10% before we went live. And then actually after a couple of weeks or a month of using the system, then being able to use those other days to upskill people and tell them the rest of the benefits of the system once they've got used to the basics and it was fresh in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, there's no point training somebody a month before they get the system in front of them, because they will certainly have forgotten it entirely by then. And you have to start all over again, really. And the other point I'd make really is that I think supplier training of necessity is generic. You know, it's this is how you use the product, as it were. But one element of complexity that we haven't covered really is that in different departments within the same firm, it will be used differently. You know, different departments will find different shortcuts which help them in a way that wouldn't necessarily be relevant to another department. And all those tips and tricks are things which I don't think the suppliers, unless they've got lawyers working for them developing the training, who are different sorts of lawyers, would be wise to. And it's not their fault. It's just it's just a reality. So we've taken a different sort of course, and we have internal trainers as well as third-party training who are very familiar with the products, but also these individual enthusiasts in different teams who have been using the system perhaps for some time and have developed their own hints and tips will sort of spread the word around their department for new people to come in, so as to sort of train horizontally, as it were, as opposed to vertically. And I think one thing that the suppliers could do more of is provide additional video, support, if you like, because everybody in the world is using YouTube now to learn how to do things, and having small, short videos on individual tasks that need to be accomplished, and having a library of those is something that is incredibly useful, I think, because people can go back and look at them when they're back at their desk, having gone through the training, and they can't remember how to do a certain thing. If they have a couple of hundred little 1-minute videos that can take them back over that ground again, then I think that would be absolutely excellent.
Yeah,
we are developing some of those ourselves, but within the legal sphere anyway, they don't seem to be suppliers that are providing those sorts of libraries.
Yeah, I was just going to say on that, I totally agree. If the supplier's website or something, and some may already do it, had bite-sized video clips that could be accessed all the time, that would also help with the 24-hour sort of out-of-hours help that's often required when people can't just pick up a phone to an IT help desk. If there was something they could find, because obviously, well, in our experience, getting out-of-hours 24-hour help assistance as part of an SLA is quite an additional extra cost. So just anything that they could do to help would be really useful.
I think if I just respond to that, so we have actually recently launched what we call Evolve Community, which is an area for firms to, and users to go in and perform a number of courses, and they are bite-sized chunk videos. They're not a minute, Tony. They're no longer than 4 minutes each. But because I think this is really crucial, because it helps refresh training. It helps users find features and functions they wouldn't necessarily be aware of as well. I think what we also need to do, though, is, we're seeing people use it, but we're probably not seeing enough users using it right now. And I think that goes to, Tony, your point. Some of it is customized to what a law firm, how a law firm uses it. So we're looking at ways of improving that. But I think also it's very much about how, we as a legal tech provider need to work with the client to almost force usage of it, almost force people to watch those videos and refresh themselves as well. That sounds awfully a little bit fascist, maybe, or dictatorship, but it's not meant to be. But it's, I think it is a case of law firms need to make sure that their staff are regularly trained up on that side of things as well. So, for us to provide those videos, and for law firms to maybe, enforce sort of that knowledge within the user base.
Yeah, and Tony's right. Obviously, we only have kind of essentially one department, really. So not all of those bite-sized videos would be relevant to us. But even if we just kind of, me, Tony, whoever the equivalent person is in the firm, gets a notification, oh, this video's been updated, we've just uploaded this, I can within 2 seconds decide whether that's going to be relevant to my team or which department that's going to be relevant to, and send it on. But just that, 5 seconds out of my day is well worth it if it improves something in the team.
I suppose the question is, when you're talking about how individual departments within firms are different, and you have different needs and very specific needs, how much would it help to then have a direct line of communication with the supplier then, if you do have something specific that a particular department suddenly needs to know about? Is there someone you can call, aside from obviously third parties, but can you call your supplier once in a while and ask them directly how that functionality can suit the particular need that you have?
Yeah, we can. I mean, we've got a couple of sort of 2 or 3 different external providers, and one of them actually I've got a very good relationship with, that's been sort of built on over the years. And actually, to be honest, even though we don't get out of hours support, if 1 or 2 of us drop them a text, they will respond, and that's like worth gold dust to us, really.
And we're just looking at out of our support now, actually, because there are also many people working at home late in the evenings, at the weekends, and so on. Not because we're asking them to, because they've made that choice for themselves. And obviously if something goes down, they can't get into the case management system, then that creates a huge amount of frustration. And some of them will be fearing as with small children, they can only do the work at a certain time, and so it is very important, and that's something that we're going to add on very shortly.
Yeah, and I would just, related to that, just add on that, linked to what Tony's saying, it becomes even more important that third parties communicate if there is going to be any level of downtime whatsoever, that it's communicated so that we can put it in people's diaries, because before the pandemic, you could just assume that between sort of 12 and 3 a.m. that was going to be okay to do whatever work you needed, but you just can't make that assumption now.
Oh, that's right. I mean, our own IT department is excellent at doing that, but you can't say the same for everybody else.
Yeah.
I suppose in general, so this last question, it really ties together, because so many people consider the support from the suppliers important. If we could just spend the last few minutes of the session tying together the complexity of migrations, the complexity, as you said, of not having everything at once. And Adam has responded to that a little bit, in that it's not commercially viable for suppliers to integrate with everything, or create these bespoke integrations for you. So they have to integrate with best in class. So how is it that in when you're creating your own bespoke systems, or dealing with that frustration of trying to make the systems work for you, where could the supplier offer more to you? If I could start with you, Tony.
Well, I mean, I completely understand the commercial realities that that Adam faces, along with all the other suppliers, that you're not going to spend a huge resource integrating something that only one user is ever going to want. It's just not going to happen. I mean, the downside of that, of course, is that as new applications come along which make use of emerging technologies, somebody's got to be first, haven't they, to adopt them. And how do they get the support that they need to integrate with the stuff that they've already got? One option is to have their own internal programmers who are capable of developing things internally, which is what we've done to a certain extent. I mean, we haven't written whole systems, although we did historically, 5 or 6 years ago, develop our own workflows through a knowledge transfer partnership with a university now, and had somebody who project led that all the way through. And we had programmers working on that, and we've got another KTP, as they're called, going now to develop an intelligent bot for a website. So you can paddle your own canoe to a certain extent, but obviously to create complex systems requires a huge amount of investment, and an individual firm, unless they want to go into the business of software suppliers, is not going to be able to do that. So there are some difficult corners when you come up against those sort of issues.
Yeah, Emma, before I come to Adam to kind of respond to
Um,
some
Yes, I'd agree with all of that as well. And just to say, as a boutique firm, when we're offered kind of best in class as the bolt-on, that's not always going to work for us, certainly from a cost point of view normally, but also it's kind of catered for all service law firms, which just isn't what we need. So in terms of what third-party suppliers could do for us, it would be gaining an actual understanding of exactly what our firm does and what we need, and making recommendations rather than just kind of suggesting this is the best at this. This works with our system. This is what you need, because 9 times out of 10 it won't actually be what we need.
Adam, how do you respond to that?
Well, I took 2 points out of both, well, one from Tony, one from Emma there. So hopefully I'm responding to the right points here. But I think, Tony, to your point, I'm not suggesting that we'll turn away new technologies or anything like that because they haven't got a big client base or anything. I think we've got we want to be innovative and provide that tool for innovative businesses to also join up to as well. That's why we create those APIs for integrations, as well as sort of having more embedded integrations at the same time. And so I think we're still very open to that, and I think most providers out there are actually open to sort of exploring what's new out there. I mean, I will go back to saying I used to work for InfoTrack, and actually getting integrations into case management providers originally when we started in the UK was difficult, so we have to remain a little bit more open to these sorts of new technologies that come along and really understand them. But I think that ties really well into Emma's point of providers need to understand the legal process. They need to understand the requirements of the law firm. And actually, relating that back to what Tony was saying, new technology something new comes along and it fits that process, absolutely should be sort of integrated into it. And you're absolutely right, Emma, as well. I think too often it's kind of sell, and it's not just legal tech providers. I will hasten to add, it's in any sort of industry and profession really. And we're trying now to take a much more consultative approach to what's in the market without promising the earth. It bites us if we kind of say, oh, yes, it does that, yes, it does that, yes, it does that, only for the client to then find out that it doesn't. That creates us problems. So we have to be a little bit more honest and say, and speak to the client about, well, why would you want it to do it that way? Why wouldn't this work? So almost standardizing a process, I suppose. So we're trying to be a little bit more consultative around, a lot more consultative around how we sell to clients, or and be more solutions based.
All right, thank you for that. I mean, it's all about bridging that gap, isn't it? I mean, there is a gap between needs and what can be offered, and it's just about. Sorry, Adam.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It is, and I think this research sort of demonstrates that. It tells us, one of the, look, let's be honest. Part of the reason we did the research was to inform us, is in terms of what this market actually requires, what they want from us as well. And I think that this really sets us up nicely. Certainly for me, it's saying, cloud connectivity and user competency are 3 key things that the market requires. So, and that's very much what we're sort of focused on going forward.
Right, so just 5 minutes left. Just a quick reminder that if you do have any questions for our panelists, that now is the time to just pop them in the Q&A, and I'll circulate them. But also a note that there's many more interesting findings on this range of subject areas in the actual report, and we will be circulating a link to the report to all the participants and all those listening in today, so you can actually go into it. I suppose just in the last, just a 2-minute each, if I can just pose the last question in terms of obviously this gap that exists between what you're looking for and how much more you could demand from suppliers and what suppliers can offer. Tony and Emma, if I could just ask you, and when you are looking for new technology, is it how easy is it for you to for a piece of technology that could serve your needs to come onto your radar? Is it something you look out for regularly? Is it something that you go for when something is on fire? How needs driven versus just generally having a look on what's out there. How does that balance up together?
I think there's a mixture of both things, really. I mean, we do go out looking, and we've got, our IT manager is also very much scanning the market all the time, and brings ideas to us. We are directly approached a lot of the time by people who've got new products. We've had a lot of demonstrations of software, and some of them do fit the needs, some of them don't, or some of them say that they fit the needs, but then we find out that they don't. So quite good at cross-examining them these days to check out the functionality. But I was just wanted to have one word about this, the actual research itself. I mean, I think the difficulty sometimes is that if you ask people these questions, they don't really know what the answers are because, there's an old saying, isn't there, that, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know it. No, so, if they're not already pretty techie, then they won't know how important the training is going to be, how important support about cloud capabilities will be. So to a certain extent, you have to see through the results to the people behind them in that respect. And I don't know if you've got the demographic of the people that you ask the questions to, and it may be that they are all very savvy, but it is that just makes things even more complicated, of course. But I just thought I'd mention that.
No, of course, and the demographic is always fairly savvy people with LPM. It's always decision makers who respond to these surveys. But in terms of in the report itself, so obviously, as you said, the data cannot sometimes reflect that people don't know what they don't know, and that's actually quoted verbatim from someone who I qualitatively interviewed. It's also in the report, is that what is the functionality of the PMS that you don't use, and they're saying we don't know yet. That's the thing, we don't know, and things work fine for us as they are, and we make do. So that's why this question of how is it that firms are supposed to understand that there's something out there that could help them. How do you go about making sure that that's not happening, that you're not blindsided, or you could be doing something far more efficiently but you just don't know about it. As I suppose, Emma, if you could just respond or answer that.
Yeah, I think ours is probably a mixture of both as well. We tend to start looking for new products when we realise we haven't got them, and it's quite urgent. But otherwise, yeah, we get a lot of direct contact as well, and sometimes that can actually, an email can drop in, and you think, actually, we have been thinking that this might be a good idea, and even if it's not that actual supplier, it can cause you to go and look at the market and actually research what's what. And as Tony said, because often it's like, actually, no, it doesn't do what we want it to do after all, but it might be interesting in other ways. So, and we do have people looking at things, and our actual hardware and server IT consultant will often say to us, by the way, this has just come on the market, I think it might be really useful, or you should look at upgrading to this. So yeah, it's a complete mixture.
All right, so I'll come to you for a final word, Adam, and then we can wrap it up.
I'll just add to what Tony and Emma are saying. I mean, there's a good sort of cross of who's actually responding to the survey, and I think that comes back down to sort of all providers out there, anyone providing new technology has to educate this market, has to constantly educate the market, because it's great to see so many people on the webinar, but actually there's a whole host of law firms out there who are far too busy to pull their head up in order to actually investigate the market and see what's actually available, and they almost ignore sort of what's available to them, and they're stuck in the old ways. And I think that's we've almost got to help some of those law firms kind of come up and give reasons as to why they should be keeping their minds open to new technology. So yeah, that would be my only point there.
Yeah, right. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about complexities, but it's also about willingness and buy-in, and that's a whole different challenge that I'm sure we can do another webinar on in the future. But for now, thank you very much to all our panelists. Emma, Tony, thanks very much for joining us. Adam, thanks for partnering with us.